Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
Wednesday morning, tail end of winter. I don't know if you're feeling a little early spring where you are.
I wore this bright green polo, Bill, to psych myself up into it being spring. What is super cool is that I have this deck that is covered by other parts of my house, so there's no wind. And if you sit out there in the sun, it feels about 20 degrees warmer than it is. So I am able to if it's sunny out, I am able to pretend that it's spring. And man, I am not ashamed of playing Kenny Chesney and the Beach Boys and Jimmy Buffett and Bob Marley. And I'm sure my neighbors hate it.
Yeah, this list is getting worse as it goes along.
Well, it's in the eye of the listener, I guess the ear of the listener, whatever. You know what I'm saying. But anyway, I'm a summer guy. I'm a spring guy. I'm actually going to Miami in a couple of weeks, Bill. I don't think it's going to interfere what you and I do.
Okay.
But then when I come back, it's game on for spring. How about you, Bill?
I've never been to Miami.
I go to Miami at least once a year.
I've only been to, Orlando, Tampa. I've never gone south.
Oh, you got it. You got to go to Palm Beach. You got to go to Miami. That's where it's a different country down there. That's the scene. So what are things like up in your neck of the woods?
Well, this is as we've talked about many times. This is sugar shack season. This is maple syrup season. This is when the sap is flowing. But my kids now, if you're going to go to the sugar shacks, these are places that open for like 6 weeks.
And again, just to be clear for people who don't know, these are basically sex masseuse situation, right?
These are places that sell maple syrup.
Oh,
and for only 6 weeks in the year, they're open for breakfast, like just breakfast. Pancakes, waffles, bacon, eggs. Not a huge menu, not fancy. These are places that aren't even outfitted to be, properly heated over the course of a year. You bundle up. There's enough residual warmth from the maple syrup boiler, and that's it. And this was always tradition to check out as many sugar shacks as possible during this time. My kids are now at that tweeny age, where tween / early teenage, where I can't get them up in the morning to do that sort of thing anymore. So I'm missing out. I'm not getting my full quota of Western Mass maple syrup. But those who
my
do
kids
want like this sort of thing should come up now.
They would get up for a sugar shack, though. I'm sure if there were like pancakes and syrup involved, I think they would get up.
No, they would go at 11 or 12, but the sugar shacks, you can't do that. You got to get there first thing, otherwise the line's out the door. Now, I have made the strategic error in alerting them to the existence of IHOP, which is about 20 minutes for me. And it is not proper, it's not pure maple syrup. And I there was an IHOP near where I grew up as a kid that I went to all the time. And I don't know if it's because I'm older and wiser or things have actually changed. But I think IHOP is markedly worse than it used to be.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Probably gotten worse, but it could just be, the through the eyes of a child, the taste buds of a child. I have to say, I think that the Sugar Shack idea is much more romantic and quaint and appealing to me than the IHOP. I do like, there was a Pat Buchanan line that I always think of, where he said that Bill Clinton's only foreign policy experience comes from once having dined at the International House of Pancakes, which I always thought was a good line.
They don't have all the international dishes anymore. That was always kind of the thing, right?
I did slightly off topic, but I recently learned that our government has something called the Waffle House rule. Do you know about this? Like, if there is a tornado or a hurricane or something that hits your community,
Yes, I have heard about
if the
this.
Waffle House is still open,
Right.
then I guess that means you're not a level 10. You're still, because I guess they can stay open when nobody else can stay open.
Now, Matt, I could talk pancakes all day
And waffles.
and waffles.
What do you like better, a pancake or a waffle?
I like a pancake better. It's one of the many annoying things about my children is that they don't agree on that. That one likes pancakes and one likes waffles. So when I'm making one, they're
I
mad
think
that
a
I'm not doing
waffle's
the other.
better. A waffle is crisper. It doesn't get as soggy. And there's also the little divots allow for the syrup to collect in there, which is delicious as well.
That was an old Mitch Hedberg joke. How he liked waffles because they were syrup traps.
He was good, man.
You ain't going anywhere.
I like that guy. He must have been dead now for 15 years.
I forget when he died. I don't want to. It feels new to me because these are people who are younger than me. So, but I really don't remember when he passed. But I feel like we are avoiding the elephant in the room here, Matt.
What is that?
Your friend Tucker Carlson continues to be a bit of an issue.
Well, you may just not understand him, Bill. I think you're being a little tough on him, but why don't you tell us what?
Did you?
I haven't noticed. What's he gotten into lately?
I'm gonna delay more. I made the mistake of watching a clip of Scott Adams on Chris Cuomo's News Nation show.
Wait, Scott Adams is the Dilbert guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
I apologize. He doesn't deserve analysis, so I'm sorry to even go down this path. But he claimed on the Chris Cuomo show that we just didn't get what he was doing. And he thought that his podcast followers understood that he says hyperbolic things that aren't really true just to get a conversation going and to help focus the debate. And essentially, we're essentially too stupid to understand what he was getting at.
Yeah. This is the old hey, I'm just a comedian, man. Jon Stewart thing. This is what really annoyed me at the rise of the alt-right and the trolling on Twitter, where it was this sort of plausible deniability. You could say outrageous, crazy, evil things, and then if anyone called you on it, you'd be like, you just don't get it, normie. You don't get my humor, man. I'm just trolling. And so it was this get out of jail free card. I think it's total BS.
Well, I mean, Jon Stewart would argue at the end of the day he's making jokes. Now, I think it's a fair point to say, well, not really, because you're actually making a lot of serious points in the mix of what you're doing.
My show comes on before a show where puppets make crank calls, right. Bill.
Well, that was a great line. That was said to Tucker Carlson. And Dave Chappelle people try to defend Dave Chappelle on those grounds, and I've disagreed with that. Scott Adams is not arguing you should discount because I was kidding. He was saying this is part of my brilliant way that I focus your attention on what's really important, which of course is like total gaslighting nonsense. Like, you could have a very rich and enlightening conversation about race relations without holding up a slipshod poll number and saying something blatantly racist about it. That does not enhance our discussion of race relations in any way.
Plus, this guy's got a track record of crazy, weird stuff over the last 5 to 7 years. So, I mean, it's not like out of character for him to say something like he finally got burned saying.
I mean, I kind of suspect he was trying to say, I didn't think it was going to get this bad. I think it was going to go beyond my audience, is what he said. I think on some level he wanted this. He's done Dibble for a long time. uh, he'd rather be a trollish podcaster than be a comic strip artist. And he's getting what he wanted. I mean, he may not make as much money as he did, but I'm sure he's sitting on a giant pile of money, and he has an audience of people who actually believe his nonsense, and that's good. And that's enough for him.
Nobody wants to do what they do. You want to be like a food reviewer for pancake houses. Ted Cruz wants to be a podcaster. Everybody wants to be a podcaster. Why don't people stay in their lane? Shut up and dance. Shut up and sing. Shut up and dribble. Come on.
So we've danced around the Tucker thing for long enough. The question is, why does Tucker do what he does? Someone who presumably clearly knows better, based on the text that we've seen him send have been released in the Dominion lawsuit. Yet he is, and this is someone I remember, Matt, when he started the Daily Caller, where you worked with him. He sold it as a factual conservative outlet, that conservatives had to be better about adhering to facts. We had to aspire to be of the quality of a New York Times. He said, I think he says at CPAC, if I recall.
He got booed at CPAC for saying that, Bill.
And now, I mean, this is like the most slipshod sophistry to take cherry-picked security footage when we've all seen like a whole lot of other security footage that shows clear rioting, smashing of windows, trespassing, threats. To then cherry pick a few scenes and to say, "Oh, this wasn't a riot at all." I mean,
yeah,
you know he's not a dummy. You know he knows better.
Fiery, but mostly peaceful, as they say. Think of anything crazy that happened. You could show, there's I don't know, you're at an event and there's a shooting. Well, you could have shown 5 minutes earlier people were having a good time, so the event basically was a success. Now, there was the shooting, but by and large, people were happy. 99% of the people there went away, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's weird. Bill, the only thing that makes sense to me is, I don't know if you noticed this, but I watched Trump's CPAC speech, from the safe confines of my house. And he did a shout out to different people, as he does. And when he gave a shout out to Tucker, and he got a huge applause. So Trump gave a shout out to Tucker. Trump got a big applause. Tucker got a big applause. Now this was after Trump clearly knows that Tucker has been in private saying bad things about him, right? Mm-hmm. I think now this is basically a thing where Trump and Fox News will pretend they have created an alternate reality and they will stick with it. And so, like, the only thing that matters is what they say, what they admit to be true, and what they show on Fox News. And if it doesn't fit into those categories, it didn't happen. So Trump is going to pretend that Tucker never said those mean things about him, because that's fake news, right? The only thing that's real is what it ain't real if I don't say it's real.
The Trump thing confused me. At CPAC, Steve Bannon was taking shots at Fox News. He was lifting the veil. And of course, Steve Bannon is essentially a media competitor. He wants people to listen to his podcast and wants to have his own media empire, I imagine. But I would think it'd be in Trump's interest to attack Tucker, attack Laura Ingraham, attack them as as disloyal, and to hold himself up as the true believer. He would have the confidence that he would hold on to his base. I think he wouldn't lose them to Tucker, because Tucker's the one who's being, I'm sorry to be blunt here, being two-faced. But to your point, I mean, what you're saying seems accurate, that they're deciding they're better united than divided.
And they've decided that if it's only, they live in this alternate universe, and the only thing that's real is what they allow to be real. And what is real is what they say on air and what they say publicly. And it's kayfabe, in wrestling vernacular, kayfabe, but they don't break kayfabe. And if they ever get caught doing it, they pretend like it never happened. It's not real if it's not existing in this universe. It's very weird. I do think that Trump is going to and will continue to like work the refs at Fox News, um, to try to make it more Trumpy, but I don't think he has yet turned against Tucker, Laura, Hannity.
To get back to Tucker, I mean, he has always, he's never like attached himself to the hip to Trump. He's always been a bit of his own thing. Definitely, I think an advocate of America first is Trumpism. But it hasn't always. What's that?
It seems like J.D. Vance or Josh Hawley maybe the people. Maybe J.D. Vance might be the person that he's been the most like.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly like sort of picking his favorites and elevating them.
Matt Gaetz,
yeah,
a little bit. Yeah.
But there's sort of to the extent that Tucker is not a total fraud. I think there is a worldview that he subscribes to that he wants to advocate for, and I just don't see why it's necessary to concoct a complete fiction about January 6th to advocate for that worldview.
I don't either. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, I do think one day I heard Will Salatan say this on the Bulwark podcast, that it seems like Tucker is just sort of whatever conventional wisdom is, he's the opposite. So I guess contrarian. And so every night it's like they say this, but here's the reality. That's the only thing that makes sense. But why would you want to bring up January 6th? I mean, a lot of the people at Fox News who watch Fox News, maybe it would be better for them to just sort of forget that it ever happened. That seems to be what the rest of Fox News wants to do, is just forget that January 6th ever happened, never mention it.
And mind you, Tucker Carlson said he wanted to forget that Donald Trump ever happened based on his text.
That's what he said in private, right?
I assume there's a level of sincerity there. I think there's things he likes to talk about that he would prefer to talk about without it being filtered through the prism of Trump. So it'd be just his thing and not just be a lackey for somebody else. And constantly looking backward at these events. I mean, look, he has the number one cable TV news talk show, and he sits on a pile of money. And I mean, this is the most successful gig he's ever had. This guy's literally had shows on CNN and MSNBC and Fox. I mean, as well as owning his own news website. Like he's worn a lot of hats. A lot of these things have ended in failure. And this is probably the most successful thing he's ever done. So, I can only criticize him so much and say, I don't get what he's doing. What he's doing is making himself a lot of money. But it's certainly at the expense of any sense of integrity that he has. And I just would think you'd have a hard time living with yourself. I mean, he could make a little less money and not be so enamored to total falsehoods.
Yeah, it's really weird. As you can imagine, it's weird for me. I worked for Tucker for 6 years. I've kept in touch with him. He was a great boss. I really liked him. And we spent a lot of time with him. The people who worked at the Daily Caller in later years didn't spend any time with him. But during the period when I worked for him, all of the people who worked there he was like in the office every day, pretty much. And so, we would go out to lunch with him. And he was just a great guy and a great boss, one of the best bosses I've ever had. But I've also been away from there now as long as I was there. I've been away from there like 6 years. I worked there 6 years. But it's been very interesting and weird for me to see this happen. And yeah, the only thing I could say is, when I worked at the Daily Caller, I intentionally didn't record anything and didn't keep a diary of anything, because I knew someday there would be an immense temptation to use it. Because it was a frat sort of environment. It was a very fun young environment, and yeah, there were outrageous things said, to be sure. But I'm still surprised by the way everything has turned out.
That's the thing that I find sort of weird about it, is that I feel there was a bit of a thread in Tucker's past career, which was kind of frat boyish, but fun. He seemed to be having fun doing what he was doing, sort of an impish, twinkle in his eye. And
Yeah,
the Fox show is much darker. It doesn't feel fun. It feels very us against all these evil forces that we're battling against by sitting on your couch and watching me on TV for an hour. And I would just think that wouldn't be as much fun to do, to have to do day in and day out, particularly knowing that what you're saying isn't really true. I mean, there's always a fun to be had being the contrarian in the room. But obviously, you can contrary yourself into a stupor. I think Scott Adams has done
yeah.
that, and Tucker Carlson has done that.
I want to move past Tucker, not to change the subject, but I think to the other parts of Fox News, the other Fox News story, related Fox News story,
Mm-hmm.
not January 6th specific, but more related to the election,
Mm-hmm.
where we have texts and reporting and transcripts showing that Fox News executives and hosts knew Biden won the election. And I don't know if you saw the New York Times story, Bill, where they had this emergency Zoom meeting to handle having correctly called the state of Arizona. There was a crisis for them. How do we and they were basically saying we would have been better off not calling Arizona, let someone else call it, because
Yeah.
we have to coddle our viewers. It's like these snowflakes who can't handle being told the truth. We have to take them into consideration. And I've had a few discussions on my podcast with different media folks about it, and I've written about it. But the one thing that I don't think has been fully appreciated is the consequences of this, right? So, from a journalistic standpoint, if you have invested millions of dollars in some sort of software that will let you quickly and correctly call a state before anyone else, and you choose not to use it, because you don't want to anger your audience, that is an ethical problem in and of itself. But what I think has been missing from the conversation is by 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 not telling the Fox News audience the truth about the election because they were afraid of them, I think that they helped January 6th happen to begin with. I mean, in other words, and also when Fox News would put people, election deniers like Rudy Giuliani, for example, on air and not correct them and sort of pretend that they had legitimate points, that's bad in and of itself from a journalistic standpoint. But the consequences of that were, I think, perpetuating the big lie, which ultimately helped fuel January 6th. Now, I think Donald Trump singularly incited that riot, but Fox News, by being afraid of their audience and not telling their audience the hard truth, contributed, I think, to an environment that actually led to the insurrection.
Again, no disagreement from me. There's a few things there that just stir certain thoughts with me. This one thing I learned from this is that there was actually an argument at the time of the Arizona call from some of the other data nerd types that Fox was a little premature. Maybe it all worked out for them, and as far as their accuracy is concerned, but the data wasn't quite that certain when they made the call. What we learned in what's been released is that they felt they had a super duper call system, that they built something extra special that others didn't have, that allowed them to make that call. I don't know what it is. I don't know.
They had apparently invested millions of dollars in some new, this is the decision desk, which was run by Bill Salmon, headed, I guess, sort of the guy implementing it was Chris Stirewalt. And remember, Chris Stirewalt is the guy who got the Ohio call right in 2012 when Karl Rove on air challenged that. And so Stirewalt and the Fox decision desk have a track record of getting it right and being very professional and very good at predicting and declaring states. And Stirewalt was confronted, by Karl Rove, who said, like, it's you've got to change that back. And Stirewalt stood by his guns, and Fox got it right. And they got it right again in Arizona. But it was devastating to Trump, to the narrative, right? Because, if Arizona had been held out, then Trump could have, it makes it easier for Trump to say, when I went to bed, we were winning. But then all of a sudden, the election was stolen in the middle of the night. Well, not really, because Fox News caught it. But before a lot of people went to bed. So at least I think so. Do you remember when, Arizona is obviously 3 hours behind us here, or 2 hours, depending on the season.
What's the question?
Do you remember when Arizona was called? Like what time of night?
I forget the exact time.
But whatever the case may be, it was a big blow to Trump, to his attempts to deceive. And so I get why he was pissed off. But the Fox News people are now like, we have these transcripts of this Zoom call, like, where they were basically saying, like, maybe we should have just held off. And in fact, think of the drama. If we could have kept it open for 3 or 4 days, think if people would have been tuning in, the ratings.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's not something that is unique to Fox. That all of the pressures in the media industry were, we want to be the ones to get it first and be able to have the bragging rights that we got it first. And so people would feel compelled to tune into us because they would know they would learn the truth first.
Yeah.
That's been the game for a long time. And I wonder now if, one, because you have a handful of cases where news organizations have had to retract calls, so they don't want to have that embarrassment on them. If there's
let me make this point real quick, Bill, because I'll forget otherwise, and I think this is very important. It is how I believe, and I know it hasn't always been this way, but I believe it is healthy for democracy when elections are called quickly. Mm-hmm. I think it's better if you let things hang out there unclear for days and weeks. I think it's easier for someone like Trump to create dissension and undermine trust and claim that things were stolen. I think it's better when elections are clear, decisive, and quickly called. And so I don't like the idea of like postponing it for the good of ratings.
Well, actually, I don't like the idea of news organizations sitting on information that they essentially know. But I do think that there's probably going to be less interest in investing in systems that are designed to get to the results quickly, because they realize there's actually money to be made in stirring up drama. Now, to your larger point, this may be a little bit off topic. That's been what you argue. We want quick decisions. Has been argument against mail voting, because mail voting takes longer, because it takes a while for the ballots to come in. It takes them longer to count. And I would argue mail voting has been really good as far as increasing voter turnout is concerned. Yeah. That to me is more important. And we can teach people, hey, just because it takes a few days to count mail ballots doesn't mean that something funny is going on.
I don't like mail ballots. I think most people should vote on election day. But having said that, one of the problems, as you know, Bill, is that a lot of states won't let you start counting the mail ballots.
I mean, these things. I mean, the conservative states that whine about this the most also have laws that make it hard to count quickly. The exception, Florida is actually really good at this. They may ruin it. They may undo what the good that they've done. But yeah, you can make mail counting more efficient with smarter policies.
Exactly.
And so one of these days, hopefully this can be a less polarized subject that we can just, come to some logical agreements on it. Let me shift back to the Fox thing, though. One thing that sort of strikes me as strange about all this is if the Fox legal position is kind of weak. I mean, maybe they can win this thing. Maybe they can win on the grounds of, hey, you know what? Sure, people said things privately, but people are still free to express opinions. And we didn't mean to defame. And we were within the bounds of the First Amendment doing what we did. Maybe that wins the day. I don't know.
The bar is high for libel and defamation.
But clearly there is a counter argument to make based on these internal communications, which Rupert Murdoch surely would be aware of. If you're Rupert, why just pay the settlement and not have all of these texts become public? I mean, this is very embarrassing to Fox. Maybe they can get away with it, maybe because there's enough incentive between Trump and Fox anchors to memory hole it and pretend it never happened.
Fox viewers have no idea that this is happening, by and large, I'm telling you.
But certainly there's the risk that other conservative competitive outlets will use this to say, you can't trust Fox, watch me instead, listen to me instead. I mean, at the point where Rupert's got to make the decision whether to settle or not settle, I mean, they were worried enough to spew all these lies because they were worried about Newsmax and OAN taking their audience away. They are concerned about losing audience. So this would seem to be in the realm of risk management to keep this stuff private and not risk their brand amongst their loyal viewers.
It also seems, Bill, like every day more stuff's coming out. I mean, who knows what else is going to come out? It's the bleeding hasn't stopped. So we shall see. I think I mentioned Trump's speech. We should probably talk about that.
Yeah.
The big line, obviously, I am your retribution. I've never heard anything like that. I think that's been I think that's been an implicit promise of Donald Trump the whole time, but I don't think I've ever heard him explicitly say, I am your retribution.
You know what creeped me out more than the speech? That there is this music video with Trump saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I think it was the Pledge of Allegiance over the J6 prison choir singing the Star Spangled Banner, but not just singing it like in kind of like a soaring eagles way, in this kind of like dark, kind of Soviet way.
Wow.
And I think it was shared on Trump's social media. I apologize if I got that incorrect. But the one that a J6 prison choir exists, number one, and that Trump would be encouraging people to listen to the J6 prison choir.
Wait, this is probably like the New York PD, the NYPD choir. Perhaps it doesn't really exist. I was upset to learn that there were no boys of the NYPD choir.
Well, there is a NYPD group that sings. It's not called the NYPD choir. There is something that exists that involves police officers. I don't think it's an official thing.
Well, whatever the case may be, Bill, these people are political prisoners. As you know, this goes back to the Tucker thing, right? I mean, the idea that Ashley Babbitt was murdered. It's just so bizarre. Like, it would be one, there's so many different narratives, right? Well, it was just peaceful. It was a picnic, but they were stoked, invited in by undercover deep state, FBI agents, but the people were heroes and martyrs, and let's start a choir to celebrate them.
You know what's also weird about the Trump speech, though, that this is less dark, is that he had policy ideas in the speech. One was baby bonuses, which is
love babies.
It's like a Cory Booker thing, and he also repeated, we're not going to cut Social Security, Medicare. There has, and this has been was a Steve Bannon project. We're going to orient the Republican Party away from uh, narrow, limited government, low taxes kind of libertarian philosophy towards something more populist that is not afraid of spending money if it's going to go to our people. And is this can Trump pull that off? Is it actually uh, useful for Trump to try to meld the darker uh, retribution argument with a policy, or do enough people actually care about the policy stuff for that to really work, and to paint DeSantis as he's one of those Reagan Republicans. He's one of those Reagan Republicans. He's not going to do anything for you. Uh, he's like he says he's anti woke, but he's too trapped in these old school budget cutting philosophies to actually do anything for you. Is that smart on Trump's part?
Yes, I think so. I think
Um,
it's a smart move.
but you like DeSantis' speech at the Reagan Library, right?
What I saw, I did. I mean, he put out this video, this sort of montage video of his speech, and what I saw, I liked. And but I think you'll see me every once in a while tweet, I would vote for this Ron DeSantis, and that was the Ron DeSantis I would vote for. But there's another Ron DeSantis also, right, running around doing things that I don't like and that make me nervous.
Um, it does seem like as the race stands, Trump has the edge.
I think the tide has turned, at least for me, toward Trump. I mean, I have my friend Jamie Weinstein has always said, he's been saying the whole time, Trump's going to win. It's not going to be close. Like, get with, he's been making that argument the whole time. And, a few months ago, I think I was thinking DeSantis, actually, if I had to bet, it would be that DeSantis would win. I think you're right, Bill. It feels like the tide has turned. And now I think the smart money is on Trump versus Biden again. So
Now
that's a
we
depressing
had Larry
thought.
Hogan drop out, and of course we can all
Yeah.
make the joke about who was never wasn't going to win anyway. This isn't even news. Yada yada yada. But he did say in the announcement that he didn't want to have a pileup that made it harder to stop Trump. And I don't know if that means he's willing to get behind DeSantis as the main alternative to Trump, or if he's trying to clear a path for Chris Sununu, who was sort of is potentially running in a similar vein, or if he likes Nikki Haley. I don't know. I mean, it's not going to be possible, I think, to artificially narrow the race to two immediately. But he seemed to, I mean, and I'm sure Larry Hogan was recognizing, I'm not raising any money here. I'm not pulling beyond 0%. This might be a huge waste of my personal time. So he sounds very magnanimous, but also might be like, I'm clearly going to lose here and I'm going to waste everybody's time, so I'm not going to bother. But does that signal an appetite amongst establishment types to do more work than in 2016 to stop Trump?
Yeah, I think it's a good sign. I think that Hogan is someone who is thoughtful and cares, and I take it as a good sign that Republicans are at least cognizant of the dangers of running vanity campaigns that are not even meant to win election, but are meant to get attention or Fox News host spots or even to be the running mate. I mean, I think that if nothing else, Republicans are cognizant of the fact that Donald Trump has 25% of the base of the Republican Party locked in. If he shoots someone on Fifth Avenue, they'll vote for him, and so he could win with a plurality if there's a lot of candidates splitting their votes. And so I think Hogan, look, it might have been nice to see him on stage in a debate taking it to Trump, but I think he did sort of the responsible thing.
To circle back to the broader primary race, let's all stipulate it's all very early. We're all kind of flying blind. Poll numbers shouldn't be treated as gospel at this point. There's a lot of fuzziness still and softness in people's perception of things. So don't take this to mean something definitive for me. But it seems like Trump is still holding on to 35-40% of the Republican electorate. And if you test Trump and DeSantis in a two-way, DeSantis can win those, but we're not in a two-way. We're not going to be in a two-way right away. DeSantis might think, I just got to outlast Nikki Haley and Tim Scott or Pompeo or Kristen or whoever because I'm number two and I'll have more money. So I'll just wait them out. And once they drop off, I will pick up their votes because they will take me over Trump. And I think he should worry that it's not going to be that simple, because at the point when some of the also-rans might drop off after Iowa and New Hampshire, there's enough people out there who like both Trump and DeSantis. And if Trump is in first place, people might jump off the DeSantis bandwagon onto Trump's. Mm-hmm. So I don't think DeSantis can assume his people are so firm that they'll wait along with him for the third, fourth, fifth place candidates to drop. He needs to find a way to take votes from Trump early. Maybe not this week, but I don't think he can wait around to just consolidate the rest, because Trump's appeal might be durable, that DeSantis can't hold on to what he has, that where there's overlap. And two, it may be that people who like Haley or Sununu or Pompeo or Scott or whoever can't abide by DeSantis at the end of the day. There's enough about him that's controversial that they'll refrain from jumping onto that bandwagon. So I think DeSantis obviously starts the race in relatively good shape compared to other non-Trump candidates, but he's got to figure out how to take the fight to Trump, which is not an easy thing to strategize.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to know about, once DeSantis gets in, within a month, I think we'll know, right? We're not going to know definitively, but it's either going to take off or it's not in the polls. And that will tell us a lot. So, what do you think? By Labor Day or something, we should definitely have a pretty good handle on, is Trump going to just walk away with this again? Or is DeSantis going to give him a run?
It's so hard to game this out because, typically you'd say, well, it's early. People aren't paying attention. Things can change. Just because you're ahead in the summers mean you're going to be ahead, in January or February. And that is sometimes true and sometimes not true. Sometimes the front runner all the way through, and sometimes there's a lot of volatility and late breaking things happen. And, people, past Republican primaries, you'd have these boomlets. You'd have a Ben Carson boomlet or a Herman Cain boomlet or a Michelle Bachmann boomlet. And they wouldn't be able to, Mike Huckabee, they'd have their moment in the sun and they couldn't stand the scrutiny and they'd fade away. Now you have a figure in Donald Trump who is a very known commodity. And the race is on. He is campaigning. He is attacking his opponents. It's not as intense as it is going to get, but it's not a non-existent campaign right now. And I think the first debates are scheduled July or August. The RNC debates.
So, yeah. I don't know if are the dates official, or is it just we're going to do one in July?
I don't know how firm it is. I haven't paid attention closely enough. But it is typical that we've been having debates, in the summer, in the year before, Iowa, New Hampshire. So I would expect that to occur. And so once those have happened and you're getting into the Labor Day, things might be kind of gelling at that point. I'm not saying that means like whoever's ahead in September, like it's all over. But I just think if you're DeSantis or anybody else, you can't tell yourself, I'm just going to wait till December to really, lay into him.
Yeah. No.
Because
That's why
things could solidify.
I feel like by Labor Day, I will have a sense for is DeSantis going to have a legit shot at this or not. But you don't have to wait till then to tune in. Please keep checking us out each week, as we will clearly change our minds. And I do have to make one correction, Bill. I think I said Trump has 25% of the Republican base. As you pointed out, it's like 35%. Not insurmountable.
Depending on the poll,
But it seems to be about 35% that is his floor. So it's not insurmountable, but that's, I don't think you could peel those people off. So it's he starts off with that. It's going to be super interesting to watch, and I would love to get excited about Ron DeSantis. And there's a side of him, like I said, that is exciting. And but there are other things that obviously bother me that he has done and said. So I'm hoping more good Ron DeSantis, or maybe he could be bad Ron DeSantis just long enough to beat Trump and then go straight. Well,
that's the hope of the Reagan Republican, that when you see these articles about how DeSantis was more of a traditional conservative when he was in Congress, maybe that's the real Ron DeSantis. Maybe that will come out.
Our best hope is that he's lying now. He's a phony now.
But there's still nobody, below that too. There's no second tier Republican that you really love right now.
No, I can't love any of these people anymore, Bill. My, the last time I was. By the way, the worst thing you can do is drink the Kool-Aid for one of these candidates. I mean, I really liked Newt, even though I knew he was flawed. I really liked Rick Perry. Probably drank the Kool-Aid too much from Marco. And it's a bad look. When I look back, I have to say this. I write 3 columns a week, Bill. So I write, I don't know, I'm not good at math, a lot of columns a year. So over the last 10 years, I've written thousands of columns. And when I look back, and if I'm mean to somebody, I almost never regret it. They almost always prove me, like being mean to them and criticizing them almost always ages well. What doesn't age well is saying nice things about people in this business. I regret the fawning Marco pieces. Those are pathetic. It's not going to happen again.
So that's unfortunate, because now you're gun shy to fawn over somebody now. You don't want to go all in for a candidate at this stage.
I'm trying to think of the movie Almost Famous, the phone call to the Rolling Stone, former Rolling Stone reporter. But they'll never love you back, Bill. Basically, and I think I've just become jaded. My wife, is a Republican political consultant, and I've been doing this for a long time. And I've pretty much learned that all politicians are bad. Some are worse than others. I hold Reagan up on a certain pedestal, and I think he was very special. But by and large,
I mean, even a conservative. I actually just read the H.W. Brand's Reagan book for my presidential book club. I mean, plenty of compromising, plenty of splitting the difference with Democrats. There's obviously the whole Iran-Contra business. Like, I mean, you can still love Reagan and say, hey, you won the Cold War, or what have you. But you can't objectively say like he was like untouchable and pure every step of the way.
No, I mean, we're all humans and everyone's flawed. But I think that my rule basically is politicians are all egomaniacs. And I don't like them. I think some of Larry Hogan, I commend him for the job he did in Maryland. I'm sure there's some flaws as well, but by and large, he's someone that I respect. But uh, you know, you know what's the scene? I'm trying to think of the name of the Rolling Stone uh, music reporter that Cameron Crowe calls in that movie. He's in an REM song.
Uh,
You know, the Leonard Brezhnev, Lenny Bruce, and Lester Bangs. That's it. Lester Bangs, that guy. Sorry we had to go through that together. But if you could pull that up, the phone call that Cameron Crowe's character has with Lester Bangs, because he's basically being seduced by these rock stars who are, taking him under their wing. And Lester Bangs is like, what's the quote from the old California poll where I'll clean it up, but he says if you can't drink their booze, sleep with their women, take their money, and still vote against them tomorrow, you're in the wrong business, kid. I mean, that's basically like you can like these politicians, but they're not your friend.
Well, one last question. So we talked about Haley and Pence a fair amount. People that seem to be running look like Pompeo, Sununu, and Tim Scott. I'm not convinced about Youngkin, quite frankly. Maybe you would, but I'm not seeing him do a lot right now.
It's a strategy, Bill.
Could be. Between Pompeo, Scott, and Sununu, is there one there do you feel like you got a little bit of hope for?
Between those three,
Yeah,
I think Tim Scott. I like Tim Scott. And I mean, I know I just said I hate all politicians, but I like Tim Scott. He's hard not to like. I've talked to him, heard him speak many times. He's inspiring, uplifting. It would be amazing to have, I don't know if he has, I'm not saying he doesn't. I just don't know if he has the killer instinct he will need, and if he has the sort of wonky chops that he might need. Not that Donald Trump has them, but man, I like the optimism. I like the inspiration, and it would be very refreshing to have a president like that.
I kind of see him flinching from actually running for those reasons, but he's doing things that you would do to prepare for a run.
He's the kind of candidate that a younger, more naive Matt Lewis would have fallen in love with and would have gone, all in. And that's not going to happen now because there, I mean, Trump has basically tarnished so many, whether, in different ways. So
maybe you have a fearless heart, man. A fearless heart just comes back for more.
Well, I do this for the readers, Bill, and the listeners out there. I don't do it for the politicians. So.
All right, let's end it there. Anything you got to plug, Matt?
Check out the podcast, Matt Lewis and the News. Read me at the Daily Beast. I think follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show.
I do have a piece at the Washington Monthly that went up yesterday about Joe Biden and fracking, where I make the case that he has broken his pledge to stop new permits on frack natural gas, and that's actually a good thing because it is helping Europe resist Russia, and natural gas is serving as a bridge fuel as intended to reduce coal consumption while allowing renewable energies to ramp up in a relatively smooth transition. Obviously, a case that everybody's going to want to embrace, but I
like it.
But check it out.
I'm with you on that. Frack, yes, let's do it. And by the way, I praised your president, Joe Biden, my president too, I guess. I praised him for standing up to the DC City Council who wanted to pass this soft on crime bill, which the mayor of Washington, D.C. opposed, but I think it passed.
She vetoed it and she was overridden.
They overrode her veto 12-1, something like that. It was really bad. It would have, DC's got a crime problem right now, pretty bad, and it would have lowered penalties for all sorts of things, including carjacking. And so kudos to Joe Biden. I've criticized him a lot. I give him credit for a mini Sister Soldier moment, and I think it's good politics. I think it's the right thing to do, and I'm not falling in love with that guy either.
Now, the city council's already backed down,
Yeah.
so they're going to should Republicans twist the knife and pass the resolution anyway, since they've already won the argument.
I don't know. I'm just glad it's not going to pass. I mean, Washington, D.C. has gotten really bad. And you can understand why Democrats don't. I think this is the first time a president has intervened in like 38 years or something like that. Because, I mean, you can understand why a Democratic president would not want to like override the city government, right? Because Democrats ostensibly believe in statehood for Washington, D.C. and in home rule. And Biden basically said, well, I'm for I'm for statehood, but this is horrible. We can't be soft on crime. Coming on the heels of Lori Lightfoot's loss in Chicago, the mayor who lost re-election last week, clearly the right political move for Joe Biden, and I think the right thing to do.
Although I do think we need to be a little careful. I mean, like I think you're right that Biden did the politically wise thing, despite the upset it caused on the left, because Democrats can't be pegged as soft on crime.
It's very damaging.
Lori Lightfoot is an interesting case study because she wasn't abolished the police. And she was trying to argue that she was a police reformer, but she still was taking crime seriously, and that crime was coming down after it peaked earlier. And the two people that made the runoff, you have Paul Vallis, who was running as being backed by the Fraternal Order of Police and trying to have tough on crime, and Brandon Johnson, who's more from the left, and essentially wants to redirect resources away from the police. He's trying to frame it better. He's not saying defund the police. He's saying let's be tough and smart and put more money into mental health services so police can focus on violent crime. That's the way he's framing it. But he's coming in more left than Lori Lightfoot was. And we don't know who's going to win that race yet, although I just saw one poll. I don't know how good a poll it was that had Vallis leading, but with a big undecided contingent. So it's still, jury's still out what Chicago voters want.
Yeah.
But I do still agree with the larger point that it would not have been good for Biden to defend reduction of carjacking penalties, even though, I mean, the argument from the left has been, well, they're reducing it from 40 years to 24. It's still a pretty bad sentence. Yes, but since there is a current carjacking problem in D.C., it's not the best time to reduce that penalty.
And nobody's going to get 40 years. I mean, you say 40, they get 20, that kind of thing. But, dude, a couple years ago, when it was just starting to get bad in D.C. again, not as bad as it is now, like my driver, while I was on CNN, my driver thwarted a carjacking attempt. And when I came out of the studio, there were like 3 police cars there with sirens going, interviewing him. So, I mean, that's anecdotal, but the data back in this DC crime is very problematic, very serious. And the idea of softening penalties for crimes at this moment is insane. Even if you put aside the moral component, politically, it's absurd. And so, kudos to Biden. I've been encouraging Biden for a long time to do this kind of stuff. He did it. Good for him.
It's the third year of a Democratic presidency, and that's when this stuff happens. So
they finally start listening. I'm guessing he must be watching our videos, but he must.
All right. This next week we'll have budget stuff to talk about because Biden's budget's coming out. So we'll see if there's any. Is there any triangulation there? Early signs say no, but we'll see.
Can't wait for that discussion, Bill. I'll let you take the lead on that one.
All right. Till next week.
See you back here in the DMZ.
Take care.